So the world has changed, the way society views the world has changed, and the context for design education has changed. And so therefore, I'm going to argue that form follows worldview. And that the worldview changes, we're going to have to change our curriculum. Part of that old worldview had to do with how we looked at the bottom line decision making. We call maximizing profit, and we use something called situational ethics, which allows companies to make decisions that are mostly geared towards profit that may cost the environment or may cost the unethical treatment of people. And so a lot of U.S. companies relocating overseas originally did so to avoid environmental regulation and union wages. And so Thomas Friedman's situational ethics is one of the ways that we look at that. And now we're moving into sustainability, and these three circles have actually done more harm than good to really understanding what sustainability is about. But we'll start there with sustainability as being defined by the triple bottom line, which is quickly becoming more and more standard in larger companies. But what about the designer? If I'm a designer, all I see is economics, ecology, and equity. I don't see the role of aesthetics and experience. And so what I'm proposing here is that we're going to be using something called the quadruple bottom line in our program, which brings in the idea of the human experience, the way memories are made, the way that people use space and use products as part of the sustainability equation. So that if I create a building that is really, really ugly but meets all the great environmental standards, really is it going to be sustainable? Probably not. It will probably be torn down. And so I like this model of sustainability, which is the idea of aligning values as like tectonic plates that overlap each other. So experience, ecology, equity, and economic values all are lined up perfectly. And that's John Elkington's Cannibals with Forks. That's where he really unveiled this model. The problem is that rarely do these values overlap. So in a typical capitalistic society, economics has a far greater emphasis than equity and ecology. And so we get things called shear points where these things don't align very well. And we have things like bad buildings, or we have things like the BP oil spill. So the desire for profit surpassed the values of ecology and equity, leading to an environmental disaster. But in design, it's actually flipped. So in design school, traditionally we focus primarily on the experience, on the aesthetics and the visuals, rather than what it will cost to build, how people will use it, or lastly, how it will impact the environment. And certainly sustainable design, as we'll get into, is really the acknowledgement that these shear points need to be dealt with. And so what we're going to do is create a curriculum that balances or integrates these four essential aspects of human experience, turning into a more sustainable or aligned curriculum. And so this is sort of the framework for how we designed our curriculum, and ultimately these shear points go away and the world has become the perfect place. Now, why do we care? Well, the ecosystem services that we rely upon have been dwindling, and our demand for those same services increases, like water, like fresh air, like raw materials. And you can see here that we're really at the beginning of the green movement, which is changing these curves, and really the idea of less bad. So yes, there are plenty of people out there doing green buildings or green products. In our program, we're looking for the sustainable. We're looking to turn that curve opposite direction so that we can begin to regenerate the natural world. To look at it another way, we can look at this chart right here, and we can say that we are here and we want to get to here. So what does that mean? Well, conventional practice, we say, hey, I designed a code compliant building, I stayed out of jail. Well, that's not really something to be proud of. We're sort of in his zone, starting to do green and high performance buildings. We ultimately want to get here. And those kinds of things require very high levels of integration. And in terms of education, requires a fundamentally different approach to design education that we've been using for the last 150 years. And I'm going to be showing you some more details about our program and how that works out. So we mostly work on the demand side, meaning we're not really creating energy. We're not solar and wind. We would like to try to reduce the need for energy, and through the design of such things as net zero energy buildings or environmentally regenerative design. And at the same time, we want to address social equity, experience, and all those other quadruple bottom line metrics that we talked about. So sustainable design requires increasingly higher levels of integration from increasingly diverse teams, something that we really haven't been very good at least in this country, for perhaps ever. So a little bit about the program that was started in 2007 to address some of these opportunities. It's a post-professional, post-baccalaureate degree, which means that we have people without a design background participating in the program, which I'll explain more later. We are transdisciplinary, meaning that we don't call out people's disciplines and force them to do the kinds of things in a team that they were trained to do. We actually want to not worry about those kind of things and move towards a more integrated design educational model. So it's a completely new program that we developed, all new courses. We see lots of sustainability programs that were really cobbled together from an existing set of courses from different majors. They don't really relate. The student doesn't get a holistic, interconnected experience. And so we think that our program is superior for that reason. We've won lots of awards. We got the USGBC Award for Excellence in 2009. And in 2011, we won the National Building Science Institute Beyond Green Award for Best High Performance Initiative in the country. Our enrollment has been going up and down. We did hit as many as 48 students in 2010. We believe we'll hit somewhere between 30 and 40 students in the fall of 2013, which seems so far off. It's really fall of 2012. I don't know if that's right. I don't really care. So now I'm going to take you through the organizational diagram that explains our curriculum. We're using our quadruple bottom line combined with Wilber's integral theory and adapted from Mark Takei's Integral Sustainable Design, which is a recent publication on the topic. So let me take you through this as quickly as I can. The quadruple bottom line we talked about, we have experience in the upper left, economics, environment, and equity. And then this is Wilber's integral theory model, which looks at the psychological aspects, the individual, the collective cultural aspects, which we're going to align with equity, the objective and collective, we or the site and the site forces, and then the performance or objective measurements that we can use. And so within that, this is Mark Takei's inscribed model with engender experience. These are goals for design, manifest meaning, guide flow, and maximize performance in buildings. And since this is a recording, you guys can fast forward and rewind if you need to kind of look at that a little more carefully. I'm going to keep moving forward if that's okay. So the student starts here in the middle. The idea is they start at the beginning of a broad spiral that turns back upon itself. And the first 4 courses are right here. We have a course in systems, which is sustainable systems. We have a course called green materials that generally deal with performance and how embodied energy and energy levels are used. We have a course called SDN 601, which is my course, which deals a lot with ethics and values that shape the actions that drive design decisions. Our adaptive design course has a lot to do with climate. And we sort of don't deal with experience so much in our platform courses, but as we go forward, you'll see. The next thing we do is we go into the design studios. And so studios are still going to interact with systems and materials, but they're going to do it from a deeper, more complex way and with different requirements. So the students get the same material over and over again in the program, but with increasing levels of complexity. The studio begins to deal with aesthetics, of course. The studio begins with culture and meaning. And the studio also deals with bioclimatic response or design with nature. And so in the studio, we're basically designing projects that involve landscape architecture, interior design, architecture, construction, and engineering. And those are group projects that the students work on in here, which will be quite a challenge for online. And then we go into thesis, where the students are required to go through all of the different topics again in whatever order they really want. But this time they're working by themselves and they're working in a 9-credit independently driven project. So that should give you a little bit of sense of the philosophy of the curriculum. We think it's working pretty well based on the analysis we've done. It'll be interesting to see how we can take those learning outcomes and generate them through a different set of processes online.